Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Welcome to the Love Pod, everyone. I am your host, Nathaniel. I'm so pleased to welcome our special guest today, Chris Wasko, who is an energy healer, a spiritual counselor, and a psychic medium who helps old souls and survivors of narcissistic abuse help. You work a lot with nervous system regulation, Chris, and deep soul healing, which I find really interesting. And you're also a published author of An Old Soul's Journey, a guide for inner child healing and transformation. I just love to welcome you to our show, the Love Pod, and just ask you to introduce yourself more and share with us really what is at the heart of your work that you're offering here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I kind of fell into this work probably in a way that I more than anyone did not expect. I mean, my background is in business. My
Mm,
parents worked Wall Street. I was groomed for that kind of life, and I did it for quite a while. But it on my journey, I had to make a very difficult decision to cut off my very narcissistic parents.
mm,
And in doing so, it was that first step that changed my life for the better and allowed me to heal, especially my nervous system. But what I didn't realize at the time is that healing my nervous system was activating all of my abilities. So
mm,
I started seeing people in spirit. I started having all these types of experiences, and I realized, okay, I'm no longer the same person.
mm.
And I I've just kind of dove deep, but it was a very personal journey at first. I mean, I didn't think I was going to be doing this kind of work, but I started working with a lot of, especially children at first and their mothers, because I could hear the inner thoughts of children.
Mm.
And if a parent was not very well into hearing that, because we can't all do that, but while intuition, I believe, is beautiful in parenting, but there is something I was able to do in helping bridge this gap of understanding of like, that's not what your kid is saying, even though, yes, that's the words that are coming out, but this is really the underlying meaning. So it first started with children, but then it just evolved because what I recognized is I was working with old soul children. And anytime I had an old soul child, there was always a narcissist somewhere nearby, usually within the family dynamic. And on the flip side, if I just started working with somebody that was dealing with narcissism, narcissistic abuse, I knew there was going to be an old soul nearby. So I
Mm.
recognized earlier in my work that connection.
Mm.
So
Fascinating.
now I'm just now completely deep in this kind of work. I help people with trauma recovery because I read the chakra system. I go and I climb in and I read the seven main chakras and essentially tell the story that your body wants to share because our body all has a story to tell, but I can read it and hear it and see it energetically.
Mm. Wow. That's so fascinating. I'm curious, what do you think is it about old souls that attract narcissists?
I believe a
Or
lot of
why do
it
old souls choose to have that? Sorry.
I believe ultimately they choose challenging lessons. They've already done the easy. It's kind of, I compare it to school. If you've already done the basic courses, you're not going to redo the basic courses. You're going to
Mm,
go to do the advanced courses. And that's what we do. We're doing the more advanced stuff. So old souls choose very challenging childhoods. It's not always in the family dynamic, but it is often in the family
mm,
dynamic. So having narcissism, because and I know a lot of people now, it's become very trendy to call people narcissists, but from an energetic standpoint, narcissism's a wound. And if we have the aspect of like attracting like energetically, you're sharing a similar wound. It doesn't mean you're both narcissists, but you are sharing a wound that has brought you together to help, if not heal it, at least try to understand it or live the life experience you're meant to
mm,
live in relation to that. So old souls just keep falling into that because I think they're just choosing it for the challenge more than anything, but also to heal. Especially now, a lot of them are choosing to heal the generational lines.
mm. Yeah, that's a great point. I really appreciate you bringing up the intergenerational stuff because our experience, and maybe in the West, we're not as exposed to this in some other countries like family constellations and things like that are really key. I've been contemplating the self a lot, Chris, because we tend to, as a culture, really take on identities, and consciousness is able to take on all kinds of identities, whether it's of the body, of the mind, but also of the self. And we take this stance that I am the self, and it makes sense that an old soul and this fascination and curiosity of the self, because from my perspective, the self is required in order to go through the development of the individuation of consciousness to get to a level where it can mature into true mastery of consciousness, but and without losing itself back into the oneness, but to so closely surround yourself with someone who is fixated on the self and is operating from that place of wound seems like a interesting study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
an interesting level to get to mastery because I love where you're going with this because I have this saying I often say, once you understand yourself is when you could go beyond yourself. So it is very important to understand the self for the reason of expansion, for ascension, evolution. There's so many things we do on that journey, but that is the journey. Understand thyself. And part of that is understanding why you're in such relationships. Why did I choose these people as my parents? Why did I choose this person as my partner? Why did I choose these children? They're everything is about that. But then the deeper stuff is, like the trauma energy. Why do I respond in this way? Why is this a trigger? Why are my behaviors reflecting these aspects of me? And how am I going to choose to develop within that? Because we can stay the same, but most of us are choosing to be better, to do better, and to heal as much as we possibly can while we're here. And but it really comes down to that understanding of the self.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think this is a really interesting conversation. And like when I've zoomed out and looked at it, really seems like the ego drive, the self that puts itself above others, is really the only pr thing that causes problems, so to speak, in our world. Because if we were all truly aware of the interconnection and the impacts we had, and recognizing that, when we do operate that way, we actually are causing harm. I feel like there's a certain level of ignorance that the self takes on in order to have the experience. Um, what in your work, what has been the most effective way of coming to that clear reflection of the self so that you can, initiate that healing and make steps in through it and even beyond it?
I believe one of the most important steps is humility, the ability to look at yourself in the mirror. And it doesn't have to be as deep as shadow work, but it is looking at the things that need to be looked at. And more often than not, they're going to be the things that we don't like about ourselves.
Hmm.
But when we have that ability to do it and we allow for ourselves to be humble and say, okay, that wasn't a good choice, or okay, I can do better here, that's when you're really getting to those deeper levels of evolution, of change, of growth, of being a better person on so many levels. We all have the ability to be better people. And when we take that opportunity to do that, it is also a very important step to self-love because self-love is a very important part of this journey. I
Hmm.
love myself enough to look at myself and have compassion for myself when I look at these parts of me that I felt were so broken, and when I was behaving from those parts, because that's an energy. When we have those wounds and we are responding from them, I mean, that's ultimately what narcissism is. You're
Yeah.
responding from the energy of a wound. It doesn't necessarily mean you are a narcissist, quote unquote. Narcissist personality disorder is a personality disorder. So we change the self the more we are living from that wound. So that's why it is a spectrum. And it is a matter of where one falls on that spectrum. But there are many people, myself included, that had a lot of narcissistic tendencies because of the environment I was raised in. And that was up to me to change. That wasn't up to anyone else to change but myself. But it really took being able to look at myself and say, it's time. You're
Mm.
you're you're worth this journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important what you said too. Like, I think that choice of taking full responsibility for one's consciousness and for one's um, thoughts and feelings and actions is really like the most important step towards mastery, towards recognizing that you can change. Because, in our society that is in a lot of ways unwell and focuses on constantly externalizing things, objectifying, and also blaming a lot of external circumstances, that really needs to be faced on an individual level to make that step into becoming more whole and more, just present in life. So yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and that and recognizing that wound, and cultivating that self-love and self-compassion allows us to be more present with our loved ones. And I've talked to some other people who, their approach to dealing with narcissism was just to completely remove those people from your life, just totally cut them off. Do you think that's the only way, or have you had experiences of seeing inner transformations result in actually causing an awakening for someone who's deep in narcissism? Like, what has been your experience?
Again, because it's a spectrum, this is not a very easy answer,
Yeah.
but I can say in my experience, more often than not, people do find separating from that environment helps them on many levels because it's like that saying, you can't get well in the environment that was making you sick.
Mm,
And I know for myself, my trauma was affecting me on so many levels. I didn't even realize it until I started healing. For example, I had an autoimmune thyroid condition that at the time I just equated to life, but I've since healed that. And I healed that in this journey of healing entirely. But I recognized from an energy level, my voice had been stifled my whole life. I
mm,
had been abused for using my voice or not. I had a lot of physical abuse, a lot of
mm,
emotional abuse, and that weighs on a person energetically. So if, like me, you've had, compounded PTSD, the energy body can only take so much. And when we remove ourselves from that, we're no longer getting that energetic hit on a regular basis. While there are people that can be successful in healing in these type of relationships, I will say it is one of the most challenging things they will probably do in the lifetime.
mm,
And they've chosen that. It's all about choice and free will. And I don't ever judge. I don't believe it is the best first step. And I don't think any of us ever make that choice in a flippant manner. It
mm,
is usually years of trying to make things better and trying to help a situation to bend in a lot of ways where you finally get to the point where you can't do it anymore.
mm,
For me, there was physical abuse involved, and it was starting to affect my children. So I absolutely needed to break free of that to protect my own family. If someone is not dealing with physical abuse, but there's still emotional abuse, they may also have to break free from that. So it is not it's not an easy choice, but I do
mm.
believe that that choice, when we're meant to make it, it just keeps popping up like, I should just leave. I should just cut them off. I should just stop doing this. And you hear that. That's your intuition coming in and saying, it's time to do different.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your wholesome and holistic answer. I think it's a really beautiful one. And it's a reminder of that those intrinsic choices that we make as uh, our true selves, and we take on certain challenges. And it's like this concept of like pick your battles. We don't always have to do the hard thing. I feel like that's really rewarded in our society, like this high achievement. I feel like we're conditioned a lot through the education system, just grind it out and try really hard. I had to leave a marriage because of narcissism, and that was involved in my childhood as well. So, and I really fought to stay in it. Like I said, I'm gonna, I would, I would negotiate with creators, say, I'm gonna try harder, but it wasn't my work to do. I was the one being suppressed. So I know that feeling, and it took me many, many years even to share my voice, some of my deeper experiences. I think to me that's a testament of the growth that comes beyond the healing. Like once we do a lot of these healing, it's not that, it, I feel like we're actually, I like your perspective on this, Chris. Like I feel in this particular time, we've talked a lot about on the show from different perspectives. We had one man who was an Ayurvedic specialist. We talked a little bit about this particular Kali Yuga being like a golden opportunity of a Kali Yuga. And I feel like for us, and having a little daughter who is certainly an old soul, super sensitive, and also has a super strong will. And, we've had some different multidimensional experiences with her and also ourselves. And I feel like this particular time, like so many things are surfacing to be healed, to be embraced, and they're not from this direct life experience. It's from, more of our multidimensional experiences. Can you talk maybe a little bit about that? If that's, I see you shaking your head, so I feel like there's
I love what
resonance
you're
there.
saying. I love everything you're saying, especially just hearing of this magical daughter of yours, because it nothing will trigger a parent more than an old soul child.
Mm,
They show you everything they are meant to show you, and a lot of it is stuff we do not like about ourselves.
mm,
But they are an amazing mirror. But yes, they are helping us heal. Because we're healing so much. We're, like you said, we are not just healing this lifetime, we are healing multiple lifetimes, multiple generations, all through these choices we're making, because it's always about choice. How are you going to respond? How are you going to behave? What are you going to say? These are all choice-based actions, and it's very important how we choose, because it tells us where we're at on our path. It is a guidance system. And our children serve us so much in this. But it is up to us to be open to learning from them.
mm.
You brought up about the education system and how things are kind of put down our throats of how you're supposed to be, and kids are supposed to be in line and respect their elders. This doesn't mean a child should be disrespectful, but they deserve respect from us as
Yeah,
much as we deserve respect from them.
absolutely.
And that has not been taught in a
Mm,
lot of ways. And I feel, and I'm very grateful that's changing a lot for so many, especially awakened parents, that they recognize their children deserve respect first and foremost, because then you're going to be able to hear them better. And I don't mean just by what they say, but I mean like the energy coming out. What is your child trying to express to you? Because,
mhm.
their brains aren't fully developed yet, so they cannot always get the words out and what they're feeling, but what are they expressing on every level? And when they have that respect from you, you're just going to be that much more open to receiving that. So I think it's amazing and it's beautiful. But I will also say it's not easy. It's a
No.
healing journey. It is a
Yeah.
healing journey. You're going to feel like you're getting dragged by a horse, and it can hurt in
Mm,
so many ways. But, back to where I said it's about being humble. You allow yourself to be humble. Um, Allow yourself grace through the process. Parenting is an incredible journey.
yes.
And I mean, I have four children myself, and they all teach me on a regular basis. I'm just grateful for the ability to have been open to receive that. I wasn't always, but that was part of my journey, and I needed to learn that. And the more I have, just the more appreciative I've been for that.
Mm. I think that's so wonderful. Everything you said, we certainly agree. I don't only see children as our greatest teachers in a lot of ways, because they do reflect the unconscious patterns that we are not voicing, that we're still suppressing. Julie and I are very well aware of that. But I also have been really expanding my view of them as truly our greatest leaders collectively. If you talk about humility, I mean, to be an old soul, to come into a body where you're so limited, you have to learn how everything works. You have to, fall on your butt a bunch of times when you're learning to walk. You have to go through all of these things, and yet you keep your heart open. You're emotionally vulnerable, and you're just in this state of just every day is so new and so full, and you have to experience life full on, like as a baby and as a growing child. I actually have remembrances, and I didn't know this was odd until I started talking to people. I remember certain memories from when I was like 2 months young, and like have dreams from being very, very young, and I even did a meditation during a guided date with destiny with Tony Robbins before I met Julia, and it was part of the reason I met her. I had this vision of her, but I had this vision of being the consciousness before I entered my baby's body entirely. Like I had to fully commit to being human, and I could feel everything. So it's very I think we don't sometimes realize, like we talk a lot about trauma and being trauma informed, but to take on the limitation in a very dense world that has so many wounds and unspoken dysfunctions in our society, to come in as this a soulful self that is just pure love and just wants everyone to be happy, it's very challenging. So to have conscious parenting, conscious education, to have conscious community that allows children to preserve that genius and connection through a life, like that's part of our dream and why we're doing what we're doing with Light Heart Vision as an interconnective community that builds bridges for this. And sometimes it feels like we're so far away to go, but I'm like, in having these little ones, Chris, I'm curious, like with your, because I really believe a lot in prevention, and maintaining those bonds. What is your greatest, view on that, and how can we really preserve that old soul to really rise in the most effective way to be to fulfill the purpose that they came here to fulfill?
I think that old souls, as I already said, choosing all these difficult lessons, one of the more challenging things for parents is the systems we're up against. We have the education system, we have the medical system, we have the food system, uh, financial system. I could go on. It's all about these systems, right? Now, an old soul is more likely to question those systems because something's not going to feel right.
Mhm.
Something feels off. And more people are awakening to this, which
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of. I think COVID was a very pivotal point for a lot of people to become
Yes.
more aware of some of the things that are going on. Whether you find yourself a conspiracy theorist or you're diving down rabbit holes, it doesn't matter. More and more people are just awakening to these aspects. So it's really a matter of, on that micro level, in that family level, how are you choosing to work with these systems? Because they're
Mhm.
going to be a part of life, at least for now. Some are breaking down, which they're meant to, and great. But we're, like you said, like it kind of feels like we're at this point where it's shifting, but we're still living it. So it kind of can feel like a little slow. So how are you working with these systems in a way that honors you and your child or children? Education is a big one. So many more people are homeschooling.
Yeah.
That's not always feasible for everybody. So how can you make that work for you in a way that you're still honoring your child? Because, when it comes to the school system, there's a lot of energy in there. That's
Mhm.
overwhelming for a child. So when you have
Mhm.
a child that comes home and they're overstimulated and they're feeling so much, it's very challenging for an old soul
Mhm.
because they're already super sensitive.
Yeah.
And now you have all the aspects coming on top of that of other people and their energies. So, like I said, it really is that micro level of how are you working within these systems in
Mhm.
your family, making those choices that support your family, support your children in a way where you don't really care about what other people say. And because you just know deep down you're trusting that gut feeling, this is what's right for our family, for my child.
Mhm.
And you stick by that because you know that there's nothing stronger than a parent's intuition, in my opinion.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. And that's, part of why, like, Lightheart Vision at its core is we call it a profound education association and co-creative endeavor. And we're devoted to co-creating heaven on Mother Earth, home for everyone. And why, like, I feel like as an old soul myself, I always felt like that. Boy, like I started getting my silvers when I was 13 years old because of the education system. And I've like experienced like all kinds of, I've been a professor at college, I've built programs, I've been through all these different iterations of education, and I feel like I've been doing this survey of like the state of affairs because I really feel like it's meant to turn on its head and go back to the original etymology of education, educare, to bring out or draw out what is within. And imagine a world where all children and souls in general are just encouraged to express and to create, and there's no longer these suppressive ideologies on us. It's interesting too what you said. Like it reminded me a lot of one thing Wayne Dyer talked about is like teach only love, and this concept of just allowing someone to be who they are and not needing to control. And I feel like this is where I'm seeing a lot of the paradigm shift with parenting is like recognizing like, hey, we don't own our children. We're not here to control them. They're also not here to control us. So this whole idea of just never saying no to a child and having no boundaries is problematic as well. It's really seeing, to me, my perspective is seeing them as spiritual partners. We're doing this together. And that's why, we see Luciana, whose name means light and is part of the core of Light Heart Vision. We see her joining us in the community work that we're doing, in traveling, building bridges between communities, and actively engaged in business and learning all these systems because we are, like you're right, we're on this really interesting edge of time where there's all these emergent technologies like blockchain and AI and XR technologies and 3D printing and all this stuff. And then we have to raise our consciousness to become spiritually mature to deal with the consequences of good or bad of some of these things. But these things are changing the way we have money, the way we interact with one another, the way we're going to be able to have voting systems in the future, and like all these things and I feel this is where the responsibility that you mentioned earlier is so important because if we can recognize like we have instead of shying away from these things like, I don't want to look at AI, I'm afraid of it or what, it's like, no, we have to take responsibility for how these things shape into the world in the way that we can, whether it's talking with other parents or learning about these things, teaching our children. Because what I noticed in the education system, it's like, oh, just tell them that they can't use AI. And it's like, well, but AI literacy is going to be one of the most important skills. And if you are looking at a video and you can't discern whether that's real or not, because you have no bodily awareness and all these things that are going to be really important, we have to talk about these things. And, anyways, as I just talked about a lot of things, but I see how it's all kind of this larger picture of really the awakening of our species. So, yeah, I appreciate your perspective very much, Chris. It's really refreshing to have such a holistic perspective. And pardon my neurodivergent tendencies of talking like in a non-linear way.
No problem. I love it because it's conscious thought and it's flowing, and that's how we continue to learn and evolve because we allow for that within ourselves. So I think it's important to do that.
Mm, you gotcha. I appreciate that. So, what is your higher vision as a conscious parent, as a spiritual teacher, and as a healer? Like, what do you see, and what do you feel are the most important things to focus on to help this higher visioning?
I feel that it is very important that we don't fall into the fear tactics, the tendencies that happen because we have choices to make in that. And when we choose to be ruled and guided by fear, we keep ourselves in lower vibrations and we keep ourselves on those timelines. But when we rise above that and stay above the fear, faith over fear, we switch our timelines and we keep evolving. We are switching timelines regularly. I have visions of this a lot, and a lot of it comes down to us
Mm,
individually and how we are choosing to behave, how we are choosing to think, what we're choosing to say. So don't buy into the fear. It's great for control. It's been a very good system for a very long time, but we are recognizing that we are bigger than that.
mm.
And it's important to always have that awareness.
Yeah, so important. I'd like to give you the gift in the form a gift in the form of an acronym. This came to me several years ago for fear. And there's a few acronyms out there that I appreciate, but this one speaks to me because I like to do a lot of my higher vision work somatically through embracing different, energy entanglements and stuff. And it occurred to me that the acronym of feel everything and remember is a
Mm.
beautiful way of dealing with fear.
I love that. It's good. That's a really good one. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of the work that you do you like to work more one-on-one with people, Chris, or do you work with like certain groups of people? How do you like to do this kind of work?
When it comes to reading people's chakras, I do that one-on-one. So that's more of like the trauma-based healing. And my group stuff is like teaching spiritual development. So my more recent classes I call Up Level Your Intuition because every time I help people heal, they start like me onboarding. All these
Mm.
intuitive abilities start coming in, but when that first happens, we just don't know what to do with them. I certainly didn't, and I was just, I was flying blind. So I help people through that and wherever they're at on that process because I I know with all that I've learned, I wish I would have had a bit of a blueprint of okay, do this, do that. And I had to figure all that out. So I help people with that blueprint of here's what you need to work on. Here's how you develop this. Here's how you develop that. And I also feel like a lot of the classes out there were missing stuff, information that I'm like, well, it would have been so much easier had they just told me that.
Hmm.
So I don't really like to gatekeep
Yeah.
information. I believe
Yeah.
this information should be out there. So I do my best to try and get that out there. But that's how I do the group stuff and probably will continue to, but I always do it in a way where I say spirit has to call me because I
Hmm.
don't love to market. That
Hmm.
feels like it's just not what I want to do in this field of work, if you will. But anytime people start asking, when are you going to teach your next class? That's like the first sign from spirit. I'm going to have to start thinking of what the next class is going to be. So it's usually by the third person that asks, like, okay, I know the timing's that much closer. So I
That's awesome.
appreciate that little nudge, but it's been a good system, I guess, that I have with spirit.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I feel like that sentiment that, life, whatever another acronym that I like is loving intelligence forever evolving is always talking to us. There's this mastermind behind all of us. I mean, and you can look at it very scientifically, like just we're born from a seed and an egg. We're literally miraculous embodiments of trillions of cells that are many of which are not even human cells. Like we're this amazing symbiont. And when we can, I was just reflecting on what you were saying about when you healed the nervous system, you were just more perceptive to your gifts, your system opened up. And that makes total sense, right? The more I've learned about like the fascia system and like how it's like microcrystalline structures and how it literally receives so much information. But like they say, our issues are in our tissues. And when we start unwinding those things, embracing them, healing them. Now, all of a sudden, our capacity to experience life is taken on a greater dimension. So I appreciate the work that you do, and it's very much in alignment with us. Like to me, I always felt like, well, if it's true that we're one, we're either not one or we're one, and yet we have this paradox of individuation. It would make sense that you want to just give everyone the best, just like the sun does. Like you shine out, and life takes on this beautiful mutual reciprocation when you do that. When we gatekeep and we hold our secrets, I think that's what causes those barriers that form between us and the greater that greater love, whatever we want to talk, however we want to talk about or point to it. So, well, first of all, where do you host your community? Do you have your own platform, or where are you gathering when you do?
Online, online via Zoom. That's
Okay.
people tend to find me. I actually now they're mostly finding me through podcasts or word
Okay.
of mouth. So I'll just yeah, I basically will hear from people and I
Okay.
know okay, class is coming soon and then yeah, do the Zoom and I usually do 5 week increments and I like to build off of each week
Okay.
and just see how people feel kind of in the beginning and at the end of that and it's always exciting just to see how people evolve on their spiritual journey, and it's always an honor to be a part of that because I know there's more coming for those people too, and that's just exciting.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Well, I feel a nudge to tell you about this, whether you receive it as a nudge or not. But we started building our community because I was doing the whole entrepreneurship thing, and like you, I never felt I was never sales and marketing, never really felt drawn to that. I'm an artist at heart, so I like to think of myself as a artist, or I also could describe myself as a cosmedian because I love to laugh, but it's always highbrow, like spiritual comedy and just like the cosmic joke of it all. But we started building a community. I was divinely guided actually to find the school platform, Skool. I
Mhm.
had several dreams, and so we launched our community on School. And I have to tell you, the whole platform is based off energetic resonance because I have aligned with people that's so interesting, and we have a beautiful like growing community. But what's I'm so interested is about the interconnection of all these communities, Chris. And if you haven't explored much on School, I would invite you to check it out. And you're certainly welcome in our community anytime. But because part of that, what you just said about having like seeing people grow and evolve on their journey, I feel like I'm witnessing that in real time through our community, and we're able to like host, all kinds of activities and events, and I feel like it's just going to grow. I feel like there's this gathering of like soul family or this larger soul collective that really is moving the needle in terms of world enlightenment. And I'm meeting so many of these people on school. So I'm just putting that out there. Maybe it's one other nudge for you. I don't know.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I have some experience with school as either a student or entrepreneur, and I think it's a great platform. So yeah, I may just have to listen that nudge and see what else there is to explore for me.
Yeah, well, I feel like whatever the case is, like we're in this really interesting time. And like what's that quote? It's like, may you live to see interesting times. And I feel like we're certainly in it. And for a lot of people who are still caught in the polarity and are going in it can feel like very difficult times, whether there's like financial uncertainties or there's, technological things that are threatening, change, right? And we're in this time of great change. So what what is your higher vision for our world? What would you love to see if you could paint a picture of it?
Well, I hate to be so simplistic by saying peace, but I feel like that inner peace is so important. And I think the reason I say that is because I was able to get there for myself, and
Mm,
it changed my life on so many levels where the things that happen around me, I recognize as around me, and but I get to choose how do I want to respond? How do I want to react? I once met a man before I was ever on my healing journey.
mm,
He had already been well into his, and he would told me this story of when he was younger and he was in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And he was already very awake, spiritually speaking. And he said, I would just walk around browsing, just meeting people, exploring, going to get something to eat, and bullets would fly by me. And there was chaos and there was torture. And I could consciously respond or not, but it always came down to me and how
mm,
I felt. So it was this lesson for me very early. Like I said, before I was awake, before I was really healing, I was kind of just starting. So baby steps. But I've never forgotten that because it was such a good lesson of these things are going to happen and they will literally be right around you, right next to you, right in front of you. But it will, oh, you hold the power of how you are going to respond. I did not understand that as well then. I'm thinking, what are you doing as people
Yeah.
are shooting
Duck.
guns around you?
Yeah.
Yeah, duck, hide, go back to the US.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very hard to conceptualize that. But over the years, that story always
Mhm.
resonates. It doesn't matter where you are or what's happening.
Yeah.
You could be anywhere. You are safe within yourself. And if you're meant to transition, you'll transition. And yes, we can go before our time by in some ways, absolutely. But this man was in such a higher conscious state
Hmm.
that he was protected, he was
Mm.
safe, and he
Yeah.
was living the experiences he was meant to. He was following those instincts. So I feel that I would love that for people
Yeah.
that they can have these experiences around them and then choose, okay, how am I going to behave? How am I going to respond? How am I going to allow myself to feel in this so I don't get stuck? Because a lot of times when we're scared, we get very trapped energy. It gets stuck, it gets stifled. We're not breathing long, extensive breaths. We have short stress breaths. So, can we allow feelings and emotions to process? More and more people are recognizing how to process emotions. That's a lot of what this healing journey has been lately for so many. And I think that's very, very helpful. But the more they continue that is when chaos around them happens. They're just in this Zen place, as
Hmm.
Zen as they can be for themselves. I mean, I'm an A-type personality. I wouldn't find myself highly meditative, but can I get myself to a place of peace that works for me and my biology? Absolutely.
Mm.
And that's really what we're meant to do for ourselves.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your perspective. And it is it's that stretch of consciousness to recognize that you can be in conflict. I mean, you could, whether it's just a familial conflict, or like some kind of war-torn environment like that, and still maintain a sense of peace. I think for a lot of folks that just seems like an impossibility. And I do feel like I would be doing a disservice if I didn't tell you about this amazing resource that I discovered about 11 years ago, I guess now, and it illustrates exactly that. They're known as the Christ letters, and he talks more about his actual autobiography of what happened during his enlightenment in the desert and what he experienced. And he talks about the nature of divine consciousness as the parenting impulses, both father and mother life, in quite a bit of detail. And he says very poignantly that because the nature of divine consciousness is perfect health, is perfect perfection or protection, is fulfillment of all needs, and has these, these principles and qualities to it, that was how he was able to be a perfect channel for allowing the healing. But just to illustrate what you're saying is like when you are just totally attuned and connected to that loving intelligence, you are perfectly protected. And I feel like that alone, that knowledge truly embodied, can mean a huge difference, knowing that that is available to people to turn to. I have this inspiration in writing the memoir of our daughter's birth, because it was really a miraculous experience, and it was actually a life or death situation where Julia lost a significant amount of blood, and she was leaving, and I was able to just stay really calm and present, and through breath work and just my presence, I commanded her to stay more present, and I just kept her consciousness there. And we had a naturopath who was able to prevent the bleeding from continuing. And I did activate EMS and everything, but it was, I could have easily gone into panic, which I knew would have caused her to go into panic herself and would have caused the bleeding to accelerate. Um, and in writing this memoir, I realized like truly the greatest miracle I've ever seen was as our daughter being born, and just the level of presence, because it was totally natural, no epidural, no painkillers of any kind. She was born with such a level of presence where when she looked in my eyes, it was like so, it was just, it was like this beam of light hit me, and it was so innocent too. It was like, oh, that's what you look like. And it was just so, and then she turned and looked in her mother's eyes in the same presence. And in writing this memoir, I was inspired with this. What I didn't know at the time is this community operating system, or a cultural operating system called the Moment Home Miracle. And it's really simple. It's, I love acronyms. So home is heaven on Mother Earth, but it's just this, it's the paradigm when we enter into an awareness of the miraculous, that it not only is one another, but also exists between us, and all the ineffable ways that we journey, and life itself, and all the diversity of life. Like just to be in that state of wonderment. You talked about humility. To me, like at the heart of humility is just like this awesomeness, like, wow, I am just part of this amazing thing. And to remember that. My goodness, I don't know where I was going with all that, but I did want to tell you about the Christ letters, because I feel like it's an important source of knowledge that not a lot of people are aware of, and he outlines for people. So maybe it can complement the work that you're doing, Chris. I really I try to be mindful of who I share it with. I love to share it with everybody, but not everyone is at a level of maybe receiving it. And I feel like you are, very advanced in your journey. So. Yeah,
Yeah,
so just
I
putting that out
appreciate
there.
it. I am familiar with that work.
Oh, are you? Amazing.
Yeah,
You're like
I
the
not
first
in the
one.
sense of, and not in the sense of study, but
Okay.
but I feel like we're always guided to these things for a reason, because, just what you're talking about. I think a lot of people tend to find like a Course in Miracles. That was one of the ones I found early, and
Yeah.
it is, or the Seth papers.
Mhm.
It's, we're pulled to these things for a reason, because it's knowledge beyond us, but it matters for us to know that. So I don't, you know, I think there's always a reason why we're pulled to, and you have a very cerebral nature to you. So something that's going to make you think more is going to absolutely speak to you, because you're also a system creator.
Oh,
So the
interesting.
more that you kind of find the systems that work for you and create beyond that, I think is going to be really neat to see what you create.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. It's interesting because I often tell people because I have been meditating very actively and I feel like a lot of my day I actually don't think a lot. I do contemplate and I look for interconnections, but I find my worst days are when I think too much and I may have had some coffee today, so maybe I'm thinking a little bit more. But no, I
Gotcha.
appreciate you saying that. I'm deeply interested in you mentioned the systemic problems that we have in our society. I'm really interested in harmonious systems and how even as you were talking, like I was wondering, like, why are children not allowed to vote on important things in our world? Like, I know we make the argument as grown-ups as like, well, um, their brain isn't developed enough yet, so they can be persuaded. But then I look at from the other lens. I remember when I was a 2-year-old boy looking around at the grown-ups and being like, everyone is playing a game in their own head and they forgot they were playing a game and they have all these beliefs and they're stressing themselves out. And I was listening to Ramad Sharma talk about this and how like you could basically look at grown-ups as degraded children. We're outside of our nature because we've taken on all these beliefs, and that's what the letters speak of as well. So yeah, well, I see us all playing very valuable roles in this awakening, and I love your holistic and albeit, what you describe as simplistic reminders. I think the simple things in life are the most important things. And I can tell you're a very good listener. You're not only just like you said, cerebrally, but also energetically, you have that gift. So I appreciate you very much in that sense, Chris.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that because I do value that as one of my gifts, the ability to see and hear people beyond what they say and beyond their behaviors.
Yeah, no, that's a profound gift and allows people to probably feel just at home with you and allows them to just relax in your presence because they feel seen. I feel like that's one of the fundamental things we all want to be heard and seen, right?
Yes, and I appreciate that too because I do work with people that have had profound trauma. So the ability for them to feel safe with anyone they work with is really important. So I do appreciate that is something I hear a lot is how comfortable I help people feel in sessions and just in general, which again I appreciate, but at the same time you have to walk quite a life path to get to that point.
Yeah, I hear you. It is a journey, and I appreciate your perspective. I feel moved to ask you like, where do you see yourself growing into? What would you like to focus? But I part of my intuition is saying you're going to continue following those divine breadcrumbs that are going to lead you to your expansiveness. That maybe isn't a like a 5-year plan or something.
Yeah, and but I like that question because that's how I always would have been. What's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? And for me, for a while, I was checking off those lists, right? Those plans. But I think the more I've been able to release, and it doesn't mean I don't have goals. For example, I'm working on another book. That is a goal of mine. I'm not just giving it all to the universe,
Mhm.
but I also know that the more open I am with to possibility, the more that life is going to pleasantly surprise me.
Mm.
So I believe goals are one thing, but plans, I tend to be looser with them than I once was, but it has allowed me to create more as a manifester and bring more blessings into my life in a way that I don't think I ever would have imagined. So that I feel has been really key at this point in my journey.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. You seem to me to have a very good way of synthesizing. You mentioned not being a gatekeeper. I also know the other challenge on the other side of that is like just the overwhelm of information can be out there, like the different systems, the different, whether it's Enneagram or people are talking about human design or going deep into astrology or you're talking about, all these different modalities of healing and Reiki, like what do you feel is for you has been the most simplified, whether it's a singular focus or whatnot, to keep you present in your day, to keep you in that opening, expansive journey?
I believe we are pulled to things for a reason, and it's following that. Just as an example, because this is one of my earlier hints. I was in third grade, and in science class, we needed to choose a project to do and it had to relate to outer space.
Mm.
So there was a list of things we could choose from. It just the only rule was you could not choose what someone else already chose. So, some people just chose the solar system, some chose the Milky Way. They were choosing all these things. I saw astrology, and
Mm.
here's 9-year-old little me. It's like, I want to do that. And I was so excited. And I loved it. I still, to this day, when I think of that project, it brings me joy. It
Mm.
didn't make me an astrologist. Like, I didn't go on to study in-depth astrology. I would say I dabble, but I think for me, I followed that call.
Mm.
And it's a matter of following that call. And however, whatever level you want to get to in that, I don't believe we are going to ultimately master every single thing we want to,
Mhm.
but get to a level of, okay, I have studied this in a way that really serves me and serves people I work with.
Mhm.
I know astrology helps me a lot. Numerology helps me a lot.
Mhm.
Human design I don't use as much, but I like the awareness of it
Mhm.
and knowing those. So, same with Reiki. I'm a Reiki master. We get into these things because we're pulled.
Mhm.
Something's calling us, and there's a reason. Reiki is a great example in the sense that a lot of people will do Reiki and a lot of their gifts, especially their clairvoyance, opens up. I have a lot of Reiki masters or Reiki teachers or just people that have explored Reiki come to me and they're like, I'm seeing all these things and I have no idea what to do about it. So I'm like, well, might want to take a class because that's what happens. You're just becoming more expansive. I did it the opposite. I was already doing psychic mediumship and I was like, I think I want to do Reiki. But it's always about a matter of how we're called. So I say trust those calls, those pulls, whatever they are, because they tend to be subtle. The louder they are, though, and those are a little less subtle because you just keep hearing or feeling over and over, I need to do this, I need to do
Yeah.
this, I need to do this. That is definitely your higher self saying, you're soul contracted for this one, so might as well
Yeah.
go now.
Great reminder. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate your perspective too. You do have this really beautiful way of keeping it simple, and I think we need more of that in an age of. I feel like we're in an age of transformation. We've left the age of information, and it's really about now how do we like embody these things that in ways that are resonance and serving not only of ourselves but those that we encounter. And I feel like the more and more harmonious we can be in terms of that, like gifts that uplift, because we don't need to be the. I really believe community is what's we're called to in this next step for our evolution, like true authentic community. But in order to have truly healthy and harmonious communities, we have to continue doing our own inner work. Otherwise, you have a bunch of wounded people who are seeking to be taken care of by others, and it's not the paradigm of what's going to allow us to flourish. So yeah, I really appreciate the way you articulate things, and I can see why people feel so at home with you. So let our viewers know how they can find you. What's the best way of connecting with you?
The best place to find me is my website, which is my name, chriswasko.com. And it's pretty easy to follow and find me. And you could also email me from there too. So it's hopefully user friendly.
Oh, yeah, it sounds very simple. We'll certainly put those in the show notes for those who are watching us on YouTube and the other platforms. Um, I always love to ask our guests this question, Chris, especially our inspired ones like yourself who are so tuned in. If you had a megaphone and you could talk to the whole world all at once and everyone could listen to you, what what message would you like to share with everyone?
Well, because I work so much with the healing journey, I really like for people to know that the more grace you have with yourself and allow for the gradual healing, the more likely you are to see the results. Because I work with energy, I like to compare it to a rubber band. If you try and just yank it, meaning you're trying too quickly to heal, and I do say this as a person that would have loved to have healed yesterday. I know what that is. But when we allow ourselves the time to process, then it doesn't create that snap back
Mm.
aspect within the energy, because then you're just going to go right back to square one. But allow yourself that grace, allow yourself that process, give yourself the patience that your body, your energy body, and your cells deserve in order to get to that place that you ultimately want to get to. And like I said, you will just see the long-term success when you allow for that.
Mm. Such a important and profound message. There's a lot in there, Chris. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your presence and your messages and your teachings, and your service. Unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I'd love to invite our daughter Luciana to thank everyone for watching.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For watching.
Didi watching.
Say have a great day.
Have a good day.
I love you.
I love you.
See you soon.
Soon.
Hey, bye. Nacho. Mwah. Woo! Woo! Again, your spin. Another.